Majors. I'm Brian Costello.
I'm Jim DeSanto.
And I'm Gerald Ford. And tonight we have a special guest.
Not Gerald Ford.
Not Gerald Ford.
Oh,
Not Gerald Ford. He's dead.
that would be interesting.
Posthumous.
It is the season.
I'm not a crook.
No,
He is
there
not.
we go.
His predecessor was. We are joined tonight by our historical expert and presidential memorabilia collector, Christopher Monero.
No.
Hello. Welcome.
Yes.
Good thing I'm not a movie expert on Comm Majors.
We don't have any of those here.
No.
That's
If we
not
were waiting for a movie expert,
Yeah, that's
we
not a
wouldn't have
requirement.
show.
We gave up that goal a long time
You just
ago.
pretend that's what being a
You're
Comm major
perfectly
is all
qualified.
about.
Yes.
I realized that you were misguided when you were like, but I've never seen the movie. That's certainly not a qualification for being a guest.
One would argue that most weeks Katie hasn't seen the movie even when she's watched it
It's so true.
the day prior.
I don't think I was distracted during the watch. Well, I'll wait to tell you how I felt about this movie and my multitasking tendencies.
All right, I love it. Well, today we're celebrating the 2020 election. We're recording this episode before, but we're going to release this episode on Election Day. Perhaps you are waiting in line to vote if you did not vote early, listening to Comm Majors as we talk about the 1976 political thriller, All the President's Men. But first, as always, we ask the most pressing question of every episode. What are we drinking this episode? What does everybody have?
I have, what am I drinking? Oh, Larceny. Very good. Again, whenever we deal with the crime themes, like I
Larceny,
go for
I like
Larceny.
it.
This
Love
is the
it.
barrel proof. Highly recommended if you can find it somewhere.
Similarly, I keep thinking, when is Two Robbers not going to be thematic? We haven't hit it yet. I mean,
A lot of crime recently.
There's a lot of crime in our films recently. So Two Robbers is spot on.
Chris, what do you have?
So no crime theme. And by the way, you should know that this is my favorite part of your episodes. And
It's because it's the only part you listen to, asshole.
Hey, everybody
for
has
that.
a favorite. Everybody has a favorite part.
Also, not a criteria
You
to be
love
on the
it
show.
so much that you don't keep listening.
but I felt a lot of pressure because I was thinking to go, with some kind of a bourbon in honor of Jim and something really classy like a president would drink, or like a Miller Lite, like Brian, or maybe some coffee or wine.
I
for
thought
Katie.
you were
So-
going to say classy like Katie, and I was going to be all in.
But I'm gonna pay homage to Montgomery County today.
Ooh.
So I am drinking Fuzz Lightyear.
Ooh.
And Fuzz Lightyear is it is brewed with peach, Madagascar vanilla, and lactose. This is a sour hazy IPA, and this comes from it's actually a collaboration between the Well Crafted Beer Company in my hometown of Lansdale, which if you're looking for a good brewery in a great spot, Well Crafted is awesome on Main Street in Lansdale, but they're collaborating with 10-7 Brewery in North Wales. And 10-7 is one of the partners there is a Plymouth Township police officer.
That's amazing.
There we go.
And I'm drinking it out of a glass in honor of Montgomery County's favorite and my neighbor, County Commissioner Ken Lawrence.
That is an excellent item of swag.
Branding.
Yeah.
There's
I would like a
branding
Pilsner with my
everywhere.
name on it.
Branding everywhere.
We have branding everywhere.
That's fantastic.
I am drinking Founders Centennial IPA. Pulled out the big guns, the 19.2 can for our discussion of Richard Nixon.
Ounces or ABV?
Well, it's not a 19 ABV. I'm not aiming for Katie.
That's like a cordial.
I'm not aiming for Katie in the Best of Show episode here.
This will be like when Jared drank three
That's
brawlers.
like the borderline crossing from wine to spirit.
I was being
That
silly.
is like people drink something like that. They end up in all leather, standing in front of a motorcycle on their birthday
That's true.
type situation.
Somebody
That was
Somebody
prior
did
to
that.
any drinking.
I don't know anybody like that. No, that was
I
after
don't
it.
know anybody.
Oh, wait.
ahead.
I would like to acknowledge something. So one of the reasons that we invited Chris Monero on this show was because we know he likes the presidents. He's involved in the political process. And I asked him if he could bring a few of his cardboard friends with him to the show. So if you are listening, I am sorry you're missing out on this visual, but we have a few special guests behind Chris. So Chris, could you introduce the other friends that are with you?
Sure. So we'll go from close to far. We have the next president of the United States is next to me here. It's Uncle Joe. There's a little glare on him.
Well, that's all right.
FDR sitting in a really nice. Actually, he's sitting in a really fancy chair, which kind of mirrors this real fancy chair.
Okay, yeah, I know. I love the globe you got there.
I never sit in, by the way.
Yeah, we got to talk about that globe. That's hiding.
That's got some alcohol inside. It's got to be a bar, right?
That is the bar globe. Classic home goods purchase.
Very good.
About a decade ago. We have Nancy Reagan back there.
Love it.
They don't see Nancy Reagan every day.
No.
Is she your only first spouse cutout?
No, I actually have not here at the house, at the office.
In the storage unit.
Yes, in the storage unit.
I do have Michelle Obama, and
she wants to be let out.
There is kind of a Silence of the Lambs S5. Didn't he have a lot of cart?
I love this.
But I do have a multi-purpose first lady as well, because I have Hillary Clinton.
Oh,
so we
very
can
good.
Classify her in multiple categories.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
Presidential hopefuls, secretaries of state, senators, name it.
Yep, you can put her in all the categories.
That's correct. And of course, last but not least, in his tux back there, we have the great 44th president of the United States.
Not a crook.
Better times.
I like that tux look there.
I had visions of you taking these cardboard cutouts from your office and shoving them into your car to bring them to your house. And I loved that visual, so you don't need to tell me that didn't happen.
They don't transport well, because the more you fold them,
really?
They break. I can't imagine.
I believe that.
And they're old. They're usually old white
we've
people.
gotten climate control in the office.
Yeah, they don't bend well.
No,
they don't bend well.
This
Nancy,
is that hobby you were talking about, Katie. Like, you needed to find one of those things.
Yes.
Like, maybe you could collect.
I could totally get behind this.
People.
Some memorabilia. Yeah, I was never a big collector. When I was a kid, I had like a porcelain doll phase, which I recognize now as super creepy. And after that,
explains a lot.
That was it. I never collected anything again. Sorry, I'm banging into the microphone.
This might come as a huge surprise to you, but also at the office is a cardboard cutout of myself.
That's actually not a surprise at all.
I've seen that before.
I heard it does most of your teaching on a weekly basis.
I mean, in virtual learning, you could literally just throw that right up.
This is one of the benefits of this situation.
Yeah.
All right.
Remember Conan O'Brien used to have like the moving mouth?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Terrence and Phillips style.
Genius.
All right. So I tried to fact check last week's episode, and I want to say about 2 minutes into it, I realized the issues that people have trying to fact check a Trump rally. And I was like, I can't be bothered with attempting to bring.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Bring any sense of normalcy to what was going on. But I do want to make an announcement that Aaron Powers has agreed to write a theme song for our show with Jim. Now, Jim,
I am so excited about this.
Now, Jim never responded to it. And I'm just going to think that is him, like, missing the text, obviously.
Yeah, but Aaron, are you sure you had the right Jim DeSanto in that?
But Aaron
is texting your dad.
Aaron, who at times can have a spotty history of returning texts, immediately got back to me with a yes. So somewhere in 2021, we should have a Comm.
Oh my gosh, we've got to make it happen before then.
Is it going to be in the style of?
It's going to be like Welcome Back, Kotter.
Wow.
No.
Oh, Welcome Back, Kotter would be great. Could you just kind of do a little twist on Welcome Back, Kotter?
Yeah, something like that.
I love that.
Yeah. Less Full House, more Welcome Back, Kotter.
I was thinking more like Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso's good. We could go a little Mumford. Maybe we could get Mr. Mumford to do it for us.
Yeah. Okay.
Marcus,
and I'd like, could
available?
Lily
Monero,
play
have you watched this, Ted Lasso? No. Oh, you're going to love it. Coach Monero. Coach Monero, you got to watch.
It is the purest form of a coaching show I've ever seen.
It's what your heart and your soul and your brain, all of the parts of you, they all need Ted Lasso.
Where can I locate this?
Apple TV.
It's on Apple TV Plus. Yeah.
Yeah,
we've got to figure out how to get that for folks that don't have Apple TV. What can we do?
We could set that up, I think.
We'll have a watch party. I'm going to work this out.
Okay. Katie, you apparently have a fact check.
I do have a fact check
that you want to share. All right,
so in re-listening to the episode, it was brought to my attention because I didn't remember a lot of what was said. That somebody made the claim that they didn't really remember Jane Lynch from this movie. And I said that this was the movie for me that like put Jane Lynch on my radar. Mm-hmm. And basically the internet agrees. So she had bit roles. You mentioned The Fugitive. She's literally mentioned as a bit part in Fatal Attraction, Vice Versa, and The Fugitive. And then nothing until she was in these Frosted Flakes commercials that Christopher Guest directed. And so he cast her. This was her first major role. Yeah. And then after this, she did 2 more Christopher Guest movies. She did A Mighty Wind and
For Your Consideration.
Very good. And then from there, obviously, Glee. And she's on another sitcom. She's been in other movies. Mrs. Maisel. We love her in that. So this really was, Best in Show really was her break.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Wonderful.
Good job, Christopher Guest.
That is an amazing fact check.
Hey, thank you, Brian. I did legit research.
I know. I'm amazed. I love it. All right. It's time for the rundown.
This is Tricky Dicky with your rundown. Is that what they called him?
I would have thought you would have. I would have thought you would have done like Woodward or Bernstein,
I thought that was too easy. I mean, and not funny. Anyway,
so
here we go.
Tricky Dicky.
Tricky Dicky.
Is what came to mind.
Yes.
Next time,
great
go the
names for politicians back in the day. We've lost that.
Boy.
There was a break-in at the Democratic headquarters, and something smells rotten in the city of D.C. 2 young Washington Post reporters, Woodward and Bernstein, or called Woodstein, look for their big break tirelessly working the story. With the help of an endless supply of coffee, cigarettes, charm, and typewriter ribbon, they discover that this story might not just be their first front-page news. It might cement their names in U.S. history.
There you go. Very good.
That's the rundown.
1976.
I need a red pen like Bob Bradley.
Yes, just to cross things out. I kind of envision you doing that on a daily basis. No.
Yeah.
Nope.
I don't let him see the rundown before I read it. So it's not allowed.
So it's 1976 on the heels of not only the Watergate case, but the publishing of the book, All the President's Men. Robert Redford gets Alan J. Pakula, who was a master of conspiracy-esque 1970s films, to sign on to bring us this adaptation that either most of our listeners have not seen or were forced to watch by their history teacher, but is a truly great film. Which I think
speak for yourself, Brian. I mean,
yes.
What does
you
everybody
don't think
else
it's
think?
a great film? I am doing the intro.
Oh, well, you can't just say it's a great film as like a fact.
Why can I not? It's a fact to me.
That's your opinion, dude.
Well, check the IMDb ratings and Metascore ratings.
Well, then why don't you speak to those, Brian?
Because I don't need to be tied to some arbitrary number.
Right, fair.
Nonetheless, to produce a movie that should probably be wildly boring because it's just about investigating a story by 2 newspapermen, but have created something that still resonates in modern society. What is everybody else's thoughts? Katie, you will go last for talking out of turn.
No, I was going to say that I think we should let Mr. Monero go first because this was his first watching of the film.
Yes.
Yeah. This is, I mean, there's so much to say. Like, first of all, I mean, Katie, in your rundown, there are so many cigarettes. Like I almost
yes, that's so true.
In every single scene. Every single scene.
Buy a box of Benson and Hedges just for tonight's episode.
It reminded me of.
But Robert Redford doesn't smoke.
He
right?
does not.
No,
so it's only Bernstein. Bernstein smokes enough for both of them.
It reminded me of. Was it Almost Famous when they're on the plane and there's just like so much smoke? Yeah.
Oh my God, the elevator was the worst. That made me gag just thinking about that.
Well, there's even a scene in the movie where Woodward turns on and says, "Do you smoke everywhere? Do you smoke in the elevator?" With the first thing that struck me when I realized that this film was made in 1976 was like that was only 3 years, 2-3 years after. So like that means we're getting a Trump movie pretty soon, and that's kind of exciting. Like it could be.
Maybe when he goes to prison.
yes, I can't wait. But I think whereas Brian mentions like high school teachers will show this, or it's something that you maybe had to watch. When you sit back and watch it now, it's so simple. It's a very simple movie. I mean, there's not a whole lot of complexity to it, but it's so real.
Yeah.
What is going on over there?
The dog is.
So it's Watergate burglars are trying to break into.
Katie gave the dog an empty milk jug to play with, and apparently that's pretty loud.
Oh, put the tape on the door.
Yeah.
Jim, you had seen this before, correct?
I had, a few times. I forget when the first time I saw it. I know we rewatched it in college during Roger Wallace's class.
Yes.
Which I took twice, I think.
I do believe somehow the University of Scranton allowed you to take the same course twice. Right?
No. What they allowed?
You never changed the syllabus, right? Because we did.
What they allowed him to do was teach the same course twice under two different names, which is absurd. But it basically was like this class was the best. It met twice a week, which really only meant once. It met on Thursday afternoons for like an hour and a half. And then Tuesday afternoons, they would show a movie, and Thursday would be the discussion. You didn't have to go to the movie. You could watch the movie on your own some other time if you wanted to.
Yep.
We used to use it as date night.
Yeah, it was fun.
We would instead of paying to go to the movies, we would just go to the lecture hall.
Yeah, I don't remember if this was in the 200 level course or the 300 level course, but
I think this one was in the one before I came, so it had to have been the 200 level.
Yeah, probably.
Well, that's when you used to come with both. You came down and watched with both of us.
That was the 300 level course.
We would go there. So actually, what's interesting, Roger Wallace loved William Goldman written films because the writer of this movie also wrote Marathon Man, which we saw on that course. He wrote Princess Bride.
Yep.
So I mean, the crew that put this one, I think this is an example of the behind the scenes crew needing to be pretty damn good. Yeah. So Pakula was into this conspiracy edge really good. He also did The Parallax View, which is a really underseen Warren Beatty movie, which if you've never seen it is amazing. And he also did Clute with Jane Fonda that won her the Oscar. So this was the third of these movies where he had been building up this idea of what 70s society was about and what had led to 70s society. And all of them were with his cinematographer, Gordon Willis, who might be the best cinematographer of all time, who did Godfather and all these other ones. And then they get William Goldman, who is brilliant in his own right. Because, again, I think this is... Unless you're a history person, and this must have been an odd sell. Obviously, people in 76 were probably excited to see it because they had just lived through that. So there was an interest to it. Mm-hmm. But for it to be so long from that and still be interesting is a pretty tough challenge. Usually when people do things immediately, I think of them as almost TV movies. Like when they made those 4 trash Amy Fisher TV movies with like Drew Barrymore, and Alyssa Milano. And it's like usually ripped from the headline stuff is TV. So this is basically a ripped from the headlines movie that still works all this time later.
Well, it's based on the novel, which is helpful when somebody writes something really well for that to be the basis of the film. Yeah. But I can see how, not having read the novel, that has to be so meticulous and detailed in regards to the exact facts of this entire story, which I'm sure is even more than what we see in the movie, right? So then to be able to pick through what's in the book and create a story that is still cohesive, that still connects all of the dots well, and doesn't bore your viewers to sleep. I mean, this is it's really a very subtle and tedious story when you think about it. Like, so much of it is just paper trail and conversations that aren't really conversations, and a lot of things that wouldn't really translate well to the screen. And so I think the fact that this movie is suspenseful and it's really beautifully told is such a testament to the filmmakers.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things going on that I think are real interesting. Specifically is that you have these two characters who are based on real people. There's sort of a theme throughout this movie of how they complement each other, but also there's conflict between them in a couple parts that is really interesting. And they make it work. They make it work for their benefit on basically what each of them is good at. And, they play devil's advocate for each other, and their end product is better because of it.
So this is an area where we've seen movies go wrong in the past, and we've commented on the difficulty of nailing a character who is a living, breathing person, especially when there's not that much time and space between, the actual events and then it's not fictionalized, but the creation of the movie. And so, I was thinking that through this, they are such interesting characters, and they've each got their little quirks, and frankly, it doesn't even matter if they're real people. They're such good characters that, yes, it enhances that this is all real. But the fact that they are created so well for the screen is really what matters.
Yeah, but there's no exposition to characterize these people either. Mm-hmm. You're just
dropped right into them.
With them.
You're right in the newsroom with them. Yeah.
There's more background information given about the people they're investigating than them themselves.
You get very little about them, and much of it
you basically get how long they've each been at the paper.
Yep.
And you get that Bernstein seems to have more experience, but that's pretty much it.
Yep.
And then everything else you learn by watching them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well done.
If that movie was made today, you would get sort of the subtitles on the bottom, like they would tell you the name of the person. They would say, this location, this date,
like the X-Files.
Yeah, like this is what they do now, And I feel like watching this movie, you almost kind of had to really stay focused to try to stay sharp with who they were talking about, where they were, when it was happening, and I think that helps to just make it more real and more raw.
Yeah, you live in this movie. This feels like a lived-in movie.
Yeah, you're tired with them.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, but there's something, I can't figure out if it's. I think it's brilliant sound design, which is not something we usually talk about. Usually we talk about soundtracks or the use of music. To me, this was sound design.
Yeah.
The fact, when you're in the newsroom, you feel like it's surround sound. They're not using any score. They're allowing what a newsroom would sound like that draws you in. And Chris is right. They're not telling you who you are. And maybe that's because these people were borderline celebrities. All the people of Watergate at that time, people would have known this story. But I found that even intriguing. And I did wonder, since, when you teach it, you kind of end up knowing all these people and these things. So sometimes I wonder if that's okay if you don't teach it. So for me, I know a lot of it, so I'm able to jump through that. But for me, this film introduced a lot of different characters in different time periods, much better than, let's say, Just Mercy did.
Right.
Which when we did. And that's, I think Katie was hitting on that too. It's somewhat similar, which is it's very close to the real subject matter. But I just feel like they're able to do a much better job of staying true to what the story is. But maybe that's because they had an end game, right? with Just Mercy, it was we're talking about this person and kind of this one case, but more the characters, where the characters in this are interesting, but they're a servant to the story of Watergate and what this was all about.
But again, not having read the book, it's hard to make a judgment on this. But again, there still had to be so many choices made in regards to what actually made it onto the screen, and so that takes such a strong, sense of storytelling.
Right.
This is a masterpiece. It's really well done.
Yeah, because they pick a few themes that they want to run with throughout the entire movie, which to me stood out as, sort of what happened at its base is we want to show sort of what happened and like how the dominoes fell. Underneath that, we want to show who these two guys were and why they were the right people for this job. And then on top of that, they want to show sort of like they wanted to show sort of this almost like sinister side of DC and how there is, they have that whole piece where Robert Redford is leaving his meeting with Deep Throat and he clearly thinks he's being followed. And just how sort of there's like this paranoia of the 70s that, leads right into the, ramping up even bigger in the 80s, 90s, and we have not backed down that mountain at all. We are just shooting straight, going higher and higher.
Please. Everything is above the board today.
But then it's also
issues.
It's also an homage to journalism in general. Like it is highlighting the art of journalism, and what goes into just telling a story and then telling it well, and then, being an investigative reporter and like discovering it's beautiful.
I think it's interesting to watch it again today because the news is so different, right? And
yes.
Like you learn not only about Watergate, but you learn about how news reporting was because they had more time to get the story right. They didn't have to get it out and get it on Twitter and get the information out so quickly, and they could really dig. And you also realize how much harder it was because you see all the phone calls they're making and the door to door, which apparently was very real. And that's really
the
what
phone
they did,
books,
having to go to people's doors.
Yeah.
like when you have to find out who this person is and where they live. You just have to start looking through cities' phone books. Like that's absurd.
Well, I found it. It's odd in the sense. I think if you show it to kids today as a lesson in some respect, perhaps that type of effort for journalism might be the most shocking thing to them. And it might be one of the most damning things. And when we look at some of the modern political controversies, part of the reason they were eventually able to get him for what took place was the need to make sure they were so right along the way, as opposed to being the first media outlet to tweet something out and then it gets it wrong. And I think the erosion of what but I think there's an erosion of how people view news because now the goal is necessarily to be first. And, that leads potentially to problems at times to be first, whereas then you had to work these stories. And there is this background of them and the Times going at it, which if you've ever seen The Post from Steven Spielberg, which I don't think is nearly as good as as All the President's Men, but it gets more into that as well. But I think, I'm not sure Woodward and Bernstein would have been afforded the time today to be able to do this type of case the way they did. I think the expectation would have been more juicy headlines, more tweet-worthy items immediately. And I don't know, as this showed as it went through, there was a lot of shit on top of this that they had to get through to be able to get to the real issue.
It really, Bob Woodward, just as a person, is so relevant today. Maybe just as relevant. And when you're watching this and how he uncovered this, and look, if it wasn't for them, we might not know anything, right? But then today, he has these interviews with Trump, and now today the stuff comes out about Kushner and the things that he said. And yet he's kind of sat on this stuff for months and months. And it's only come out really in stories on cable news. And, is there a smoking gun there? Could he have come out and said this stuff earlier, or does nothing matter today? Because does nothing matter you say about this president? Like nothing you say about this president really matters. But back then we just held, Nixon was the first one. We held our presidents to such a high standard. Would the Watergate break-in today take down a presidency?
No, I don't think so.
No, and
I think we've seen worse than it since then.
And it's interesting because the institution in and of itself sort of, it basically consumed itself, right? Like the institution of journalism is responsible for where journalism is at.
I completely agree.
It 100% is.
I completely agree with that statement.
Yep. And it is because of the money making side of this that they started to relax how they report. They started to pick and choose what they went after rather than what was more impactful.
Well, to me, if you look at like Bob Woodward, and he's a great example of this, right? Nowadays, after maybe a couple of those Watergate stories, the first big one that would have hit, right? He would have been offered a cable network show from one of the cable network shows, and it would have been about Bob Woodward at that point. And that's where, when it's about the name as opposed to the story, is where I think at times it doesn't turn into news anymore, which is why I think Chris is right. He's still one of these people that you want to read whatever book he's writing, that you want to read his takes on it, because it's never necessarily been about Bob Woodward. He wrote about, and he's also a reason like people like Trump will sit down with him, right? Bush sat down with him. If he had a couple books during the Iraq War that came out that were really interesting books that you might think, well, would one of these guys sit down with Bob Woodward? And part of the reason is he's always been more about what is happening as opposed to we need to have the CNN show with Bob Woodward or the MSNBC show with Bob Woodward. And I don't know if the celebrity of media today would allow for somebody new to do that. They might jump for something like that.
I think that you're putting all the responsibility though on the journalists and not so much on the consumer. Because I think what we've seen with a lot of professions over the past few decades is a shift in perspective and respect.
But we do that with every other institution.
What do you mean?
Medicine, we put the blame on pharmaceutical companies. We don't put the blame on the consumer. We put the blame. I'm just saying.
So are you saying that that's the right thing to do?
I'm saying it's. I think their willingness to sort of kind of compromise what they do is what has led them to this path.
First of all, I don't think you can compare this to pharmaceutical companies. Secondly, it's a completely different relationship. When you talk about, pharmaceutical companies, there is a power hierarchy. One of the things that's changed journalism is that people don't see a difference between reading something that was written by the New York Times and reading something that their friend next door posted on Facebook and the viral video that goes along with it.
Well, but
those
that's
things
because
are held in the same regard now.
But that's because the quality is not. The quality doesn't exist.
I don't think you can make that blanket statement. I think
well, let's say this: that the New York Times and the Washington Post are the two shining beacons of keeping journalism where at least sort of in the right lane where it should be, but that's not enough. I'm not specifically saying those two newspapers. I'm saying the institution as a whole.
Yeah, but they don't all work together. That's just not fair to just say that about all of journalism. There are some news outlets that have taken the easy way out in terms of, you're right, making the fast buck, putting out the story that's sensational, Absolutely. And then there are still news outlets that are doing it right and doing their due diligence and checking their facts and are institutions of, honor and integrity. Yeah. And I just don't think that it's fair for us to like lump that all together.
I didn't. I'm saying they're part of the same. They are part of the group that delivers news. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, so I don't understand what your problem is with what I said. Well, because you just repeated exactly what I said and said it's fine.
My problem is with saying like journalism isn't what it used to be. Yes, in some cases, certainly. But you still have some excellent reporting, some excellent journalists who would tell a story the same way.
Right, but the public has been conditioned to not care.
Yes, that's what's changed.
But that's right, but that's because of journalism, not because of the people. It's because of the amount of it that is out there. It's the amount that, it's just
maybe it's too fast and there's too much of it. I mean, there wasn't a lot of choices back then. I mean, that's kind of clear, right? And they constantly kind of show that when the guy's driving to the White House every day to deliver the paper and they intercut that scene. It's like you got the New York Times, the Washington Post. They probably had, I don't even know what else. They might have had the Chicago Tribune or whatever. It's like 3 or 4 papers are driving everyone's understanding. Chris, when you teach it, because I teach it, and of this time period as well, why do you think the story of Watergate still resonates with people? Because I think part of why it still resonates is why the movie resonates, because they're able to capture what was the meaning of that. But why do you think we're still so enamored with this long after Nixon is dead? And I mean, to be honest, as Jim said, this probably wouldn't even be anything that's investigated based upon the crazy stuff that's happened over the past 2 decades in politics.
So full disclosure, since I'm not teaching history anymore and just U.S. government, it comes up in my teaching a little bit differently. But I think, going back to what I said earlier about how it really is the watermark between where we didn't really care about what presidents did behind the scenes and where we do. And I think that's a big reason, but like in a real simple, like elementary level, Richard Nixon's the only president to resign. So like that much right there, I think signifies how Nixon and this whole incident is still so, it's so relevant and it's so exciting to people because it brought him down. Now, like I think a lot of kids today in high school or whatever that are learning about this for the first time, they don't learn about the journalism side of it.
Yeah.
They don't learn about the Woodward and Bernstein side of it and understanding why that was so important. But at the same time, we hear so much now about the importance of the press. And when, clowns show up there, starts talking about fake news and this and that, enemy of the people, we can always point back to saying, if we didn't have the press in 1973, 1974, like we never would have found out about the biggest presidential scandal of the 20th century.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Those themes are important.
Yes, they're important to us. Right.
To us.
And that's the biggest difference now is that no one cares about this unless it can help their guy or
That's
their
correct.
woman.
Yes.
That's correct.
And so like that's the biggest problem facing like people, people being invested in the Washington Post. And, at some point you just have to say some of these people have, are morally right and some of them are morally wrong. And the fact that the journalism is trying to shine a light on morally wrong things a lot of times, to call it fake news and to try to move the needle and say like they're just out to get us. And they were doing it in this movie. That it's present in this film that the administration is coming out and saying the Washington Post is fake news. Again, that idea that you can weaponize the news because of the power that they demonstrate in this movie.
But
right?
I also think it's interesting because you see, I guess going to modern journalism again, like they do have time, right? We're seeing deadlines and they're posting things, and the way we processed news was very different. We would get the paper. I still remember even like all 4 years in college, because I was I had a borderline history major, but I always got the New York Times because we got a deal, and you would get it and you would read it. And it was really pre-internet by and large. I mean, the internet existed, but it wasn't like we have it today. And you would read it and be able to process it and think about it. And then there would be other stories. Maybe the follow-up story would be 2 days later. Whereas now people consume news instantaneously. Or if, nobody watches the nightly news, but you're going to have that echo chamber of, I'm a Fox News person or an MSNBC news person. And am I going to watch Rachel Maddow, who's going to have some huge expose? This is the biggest story of the year. Or is it going to be Tucker Carlson? Or am I going to go really down the wormhole and I'm a crazy tinfoil hat person and go watch Nutjob InfoWars, that's going to validate my crazy side. Whereas before there was, for better or worse, there was an editorial process that we saw here that constantly challenged people to be better. Like people were constantly challenging Woodward and Bernstein. It's not quite good enough. You can be better than that. And I feel like the filter is lost in some respect. And we're expecting people who don't have either the ability, the desire, or it doesn't fit their agenda to filter that. And it gets out. And that's interesting me to watch this because, Nixon is what Nixon was and what he was doing and how corrupt he was. And I think the film hits on this a little bit. But what I've always found interesting about Nixon is Watergate was almost the least of the bad things he was doing because it was almost irrelevant. He was going to win that election. That election was a shit show. He wasn't going to lose that election.
Well, that's what he did.
I know. And he had created a systematic way of dealing with people that completely violated everything that we should hold as important in the country. And they kind of alluded to that, I thought, in a really brilliant way with all these people who had worked for him. And they were saying, I loved the RNC. I was working for him and I was doing all these things. And then I realized what was actually going on and what that meant. And maybe one of the differences is that people actually cared back then, whereas people today are willing to just say, I'm going to continue to facilitate and allow this type of things to occur to validate my point of view.
Well, and I think there's also then that assumption that everybody else is doing that too. And I think that's one of the problems with journalism that I struggle with is there is still a code for journalists. And yes, there are news outlets that don't follow it. But if you go to your major news outlets, if you are a reporter and you make up facts, you are going to get fired. Like, that's just against and you see it happen all the time.
There's too much editorial now on television and on the internet that is consumed as news.
Yes.
And so
they have to fill the air. They have to fill the air.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so,
but that's what folks don't get, right? It's like there's no differentiation. Like watching the debate, I said to Jim, I had this realization that like folks, there were things said in the debate that my reaction was, oh, I didn't know. I've never heard that. I don't know whether that's true or not. And so then I'm going to go do my due diligence and like look stuff up and see what are they referencing? What are the details behind this? And then there's folks that are going to listen to either of the candidates say a thing and they're going to say, yeah, so that must be true.
And that's what I think one of the biggest changes has been is not to one of the big changes in our culture over the course of the 50 years since this all sort of went down is that back then I think the currency of like your moral character was that at the bottom line at the end of the day you would figure out what was right and try to do that, right? Do the right thing. A great movie. But
do the right thing.
I think more our currency and I don't know what warped this and how it became. It's probably our parents' fault, our parents' generation.
You love blaming them.
It's always their fault.
Love giving them all the blame.
Blame the baby
boomers. It's all their fault
for everything.
The idea that the currency didn't become like do what's right and figure out what's right and do it. It became, I'm always right and I always do the right thing. And so to be proven wrong and accept new evidence and new data and change your mind was seen as a weakness rather than a strength. And I think we're slowly, hopefully, turning
I don't know about that.
a little bit. I don't know.
Listen, we have solved the problems of modern society, but we have failed to address a few very important things about this movie.
Robert Redford is hot.
He's so hot.
Can
Robert
I discuss-
Redford and Dustin Hoffman. I have
Yeah.
never found Dustin Hoffman sexy. He is dead sexy in this movie.
Well, this
He's
is
got that
really
He had the
interesting.
Leaf Garrett hair.
Yeah, he did. That was
Laser?
very Leaf Garrett, very David
and
Cassidy
just,
almost.
He just had a swagger to
family.
him, and that
He had
part
a
of
banjo.
journalism,
He had a
right?
banjo.
Like,
That
I'm
would've
just
been
gonna sweet talk you. I'm just gonna pretend that you invited me into the house and smile at you in this kind of a way that you're gonna offer me a cup of coffee, and that's what's
Cold
gonna
coffee.
happen.
I think
And
it's
4 hours later, I have
don't
a story.
know. For me, it's easy to forget how amazing Dustin Hoffman is.
Yes.
I don't know why.
He's
Yeah.
outstanding.
I know in my head that he is an incredible actor, but there's part of me that sort of like forgets how good, right? Like, and I think my problem is that like growing up, I was always told like De Niro and this and that, and I think De Niro might hot take. I think he might be one of the most overrated actors that we grew up thinking should be idolized.
You've said this.
I
before.
do. I've said it before.
Yep.
Someone like Dustin Hoffman literally makes you forget that they are an actor. Right? You look at that and I don't think Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah. And
Well,
who
you
is
know-
the is he the head editor? What do you call the guy in charge?
Ben
Bradley.
Bradley.
He looks like Francis McDermott in male form.
Yeah, he does.
Just
Oh, Jason Robards.
Yeah.
Jason Robards is such a legend. I mean,
Oh my
when you
God,
see
he's
it,
so
it's just-
good. So good. And I
Love
also
Jack
just have to
Warren
point
as
out,
well.
friends, because I pay attention to these things. 1976, surprise, surprise, there were women and people of color in the film industry that you could employ in a film. That was mostly about white men, but still showed that there are other humans in the world.
Hey, a couple of great cameos in this film. The Watergate guard at the very beginning
Yeah.
was the real Watergate guard that caught them.
Wow.
That's
that
not
caught on to.
That's not a cameo, Brian. That's
That is a
a brief-
cameo.
That is a cameo. He
yeah.
opens he checks
That's
that
amazing.
that's a cameo.
Yeah.
And then the female reporter that Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford convinced to get the list of the creep from her ex-boyfriend or fiance or whatever that.
Yeah.
Of course, one of the stars of the amazing Paul Newman film, Slapshot.
she was his was she his
She was
his wife
the
or
Michael. No, she was the younger wife of
okay.
the sheriff from Twin Peaks.
I just fact checked in real time. Cameo, a small character part in a player movie played by a distinguished actor or a celebrity.
I was going to say, is Richard Nixon's clip considered a cameo?
No.
well,
I have,
go
I have
ahead.
a cam-
I think.
I have a cameo.
Yeah.
All right. Yes.
And I know Brian will appreciate this the most because it's a connection.
Yeah.
It's an Alex P. Keaton Nixon worshipping connection.
Yeah.
In that, what is it? I guess he's the treasurer or something
Of the the Young Republicans Club.
Sloan, his wife, right, is Meredith Baxter.
Yes.
Oh, I was trying to
is.
figure out
That's
why she
Sloane's
looks so
wife.
familiar.
That
Well
was
done.
her.
Very early.
And the
Well done.
creepy Stephen Collins, the creepy dad from Seventh Heaven, who turned into
Oh, yes!
a sex
Yes!
criminal.
I didn't know
is
that.
in the film
Yeah.
as well. Oh yeah, he is.
That's
why he stopped being on Always Sunny in Philadelphia as D and
Was
Dennis's
he
real
was
dad.
he Sloan?
Yes.
He was Sloan.
Yeah.
He was Sloan.
Meredith was his wife, right?
Yes, Meredith. Yes, very good.
I also loved the way they landed this plane.
Mm-hmm.
The last bit of this movie being told in typewriter. I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it
because
too.
there's so much more to the story than what they can fit in this movie, and so to just give us really the headlines.
The only
Oh my
thing
gosh.
I'll say about that is that, and I like this feeling, but I feel like some people might not like it, is that the climax of the movie passes you by without you even knowing it.
I agree with that. I didn't like the end for that reason.
Yeah, because like you get the typewriter scene, and then it cuts to black, and you're like, oh, so that conversation he had was the big, thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Gotcha.
it's interesting. That was a 70s film thing because I don't want to ruin the French. Is everybody seen the French Connection here?
It's been a while, but
Okay, but the 70s films had that vibe to them, some of them, where the ending was less than what the product was. And I think that fits. I will say this. They did something with the ending that I loved throughout the entire film, which was the use of the split diapeter, where it's like two different images are in focus at the same time.
Yeah.
And what I thought was brilliant about how they did this, and this is more in the middle of the film, but it kind of carried throughout, is if you notice, there's a point where the investigation's going kind of okay, but Eagleton, who was the original VP candidate for the Democrats, is resigning. So you see Robert Redford working, but in the background, you're also being drawn to this. And I love how they were constantly highlighting, like, everybody's missing the big picture, but these guys. Everybody else is focused on these other things.
they did it with the inauguration.
And that's how they end, before they do the typewriter thing. The end shot that I love is Nixon being sworn in. And you see, to me, the ending shot, and I actually forgot the teletype at the end, because in my mind, it's always seeing Nixon and then you see them still working to get the story, regardless of the fact that he won.
Yeah.
That they were still going to continue down that path to see where the story played out.
Two more things that I loved. I loved that Ben Bradley at the beginning seems like he's going to be the antagonist character, right? Where you've got two young reporters, their copy editor has put them on this story, but the big guy is like, no, these guys, they don't have enough chops to do this. Like, we need somebody on national news to take this story. And so you see him first as like their obstacle that they have to get past. And then he becomes like their biggest defender, their cheerleader, their supporter, their mentor. And so I love seeing that shift, that relationship change. And then secondly, when you follow with them, you also encounter, like their self-doubt. And, they're not always sure. They are not always certain. They've got a gut feeling on it a lot of the time. But, they've got a whole lot of people that won't commit to anything. And so a lot of the times they are driving the ship on just pure feeling and hoping that they are driving in the right direction. And that moment where Redford basically says, like, did they just play us? Like, was this all, if everything else was orchestrated, right? If everything else is part of the conspiracy, then so could the whole trail that we've been following. And like, you feel that in the pit of your stomach, like, to think that this was going to be like a career changing story, and then feel that uneasy, like, or we could have just been duped.
Yeah.
Like, whew.
Yeah, that's really cool. I did like that part a lot.
Okay, one last moment before we move on.
Yes.
Our commenter in Hauppauge, New York, Hype Laura Merrick, has been to the Watergate Hotel, has sent us photos of her having cocktails on the rooftop deck, and her son is also a presidential fan. He loves the presidents. He knows all of the presidents.
A ventriloquist Richard Nixon puppet.
I'll have to ask. So we do have a video of Darwin, who is our youngest commenter fan besides Jim and my daughters, but they don't get to really actually listen to the show. So Darwin listens to the show, and he filmed something for us to play tonight.
Oh, are we gonna?
We have a little.
Should I do it now?
Yeah, we have a little fan
let's
video.
start
This is in reference to last week's movie.
Peanut, walnut, pine nut, all natural, white macadamia nut, pecan nut, my mommy's nut.
Thank you, Darwin.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's amazing. Fan created art.
This is a clip show.
Yeah, we got this is a clip show. We got
Tosh
a lot of clips here. All right, quickly though, I think one last word goes to Chris because it was the first thing he saw of this. Would you recommend this film to others, and what was to you the big takeaway from it?
So I would recommend it. I'd recommend it with caution in that you have to understand it's from a different time. If you're a millennial and you're like, what are they doing? Why don't they just get on the internet? Like, what is that thing that he's like? Why does it take him so long to call somebody? The poor guy's in such a hurry to get information. It takes him so long to make phone calls.
Those nines, man. Those nines are rough.
So with caution, knowing that you're watching just something from a different time period. But, again, my biggest takeaway, and I think it's been touched on here a little bit, is just the rawness and that newsroom atmosphere. And look, I don't know. I mean, maybe newsrooms today are still very similar to that in terms of the hustle and the bustle and everyone's rushing around and there's breaking news coming in left and right. But man, Brian, you nailed it at the beginning when you talked about not the soundtrack, but the sound. The background noise constantly happening in the newsroom. When he's in the parking garage talking to Deep Throat, we haven't even mentioned Deep Throat tonight. Yeah. But the sound of the shoes on the ground at night, the click clack of the shoes, and there's just so many elements that just draw you into what's happening. So, I would say that the biggest takeaway is just to really get a sense of what that era of journalism was like. And look, the historical accuracy, I mean, from everything I've seen, it's pretty spot on. There's some inconsistencies, but some of those are also from Woodward's stories. Yes, this mystery of the flower pot on the balcony, and he would put the flag in. Did it really happen? Has Woodward and Mark Felt been making things up over the years about how they really communicated? And there's a lot of little nuances that you could really dig into, but overall, I mean, to understand what journalism was like at the time, to get a sense of the importance of what these two did and why it's so important even to journalism today. I mean, I think those are the big takeaways.
And before we go, go ahead, Jim. You go.
I was just going to say, as a film, the one thing I didn't say is that there's an edge of your seatness to this movie
that makes no sense.
That makes no sense. It feels like you're strapped to the front of a train the entire movie. And that is remarkable considering what it's about, the characters we're dealing with, and the fact that we sort of know the story already.
Yeah. We don't give recommendations anymore, but if you have sleeping problems and you're looking to sleep, or you're a history lover, might I recommend this fantastic book, The Lost Souls of the American Presidency, The Decline into Demagoguery and the Prospects of Renewal. Which I'm
going to Stephen F. not read that fucking book.
Well done. I can't believe you just went for the pun. Lowest form of humor, as described by you.
But it is a fantastic book that ties into our conversation.
Better not say that again.
Oh my gosh.
And 2 out of the 3 pictures, if you want to Google the cover, look presidential. I'll leave the third one up to you.
Looks
all right, it's time for Game of the Week. All right, here we go. Game of the week. This week we're playing ABC. We have 3 categories: a star category, a director category, and a style of film category. You have to pick one from each category to make the perfect film. Our stars are male leads of the 1970s: Robert Redford, Dustin Hoffman, or Mr. Clint Eastwood. A little political bent there to give some of our right-leaning friends a hand. Directors, the amazing Spike Lee, Christopher Guest of Best in Show fame, or of course, whenever we play this game, the ghost of Emil Ardolino, if you're so inclined to pick him, and why wouldn't you want to? And style of film. Should we make a biopic of William Howard Taft, America's largest president, a film adaptation of Different Strokes, or should we make an 80s style teen slasher film? All right, Jim, you go first. What is your perfect combination?
My perfect combination is Clint Eastwood, directed by Spike Lee, in an 80s style teen slasher film.
Ooh.
Set in the 80s. Just like Do the Right Thing.
Oh, like like if a slasher showed up on Mookie's block.
Yeah.
I
want all those colors. I want that New York.
You want that
I want
80s? You want Dinkins, New York.
Yeah, I want
late 80s New York.
I want Spike Lee himself as like a mid-20-year-old actor interacting with Clint Eastwood, who is the slasher of this film.
Okay, perfect. Katie, what do you want?
Well, Jim took my idea, so I'm going to pivot quickly.
Okay.
And say that I would. I'm pivoting. I would love to see Christopher Guest direct a biopic of William Howard Taft.
Okay, and who's going to star in it?
Featuring, of course, Dustin Hoffman. I don't think he's playing Taft, and I don't know any other parts of Taft's story, but we'll figure it out.
He could play Teddy Roosevelt.
Okay,
he might
great.
be a good Teddy.
He's not tall enough. Do we
need to tell everyone who Emil Ardolino is?
Yes, because I'm sure nobody knows.
Yeah.
If you listen to the show, you know Emil Ardolino.
Yeah,
nobody listens.
No one listens. They might be listening to this.
The
episode.
director of such films
Chris's
as
mom is listening.
Sister Act, 3 Men and a Little Lady, and of course, the amazing American film Chances Are,
and
Classics.
Dirty Dancing,
and Dirty Dancing.
The best of his films. You leave
actual
out.
Classic.
Dirty Dancing is really. I will.
Dirty
Dancing is a very good movie.
It's an amazing film. All right, I'll go. I would, of course, pick Emil Ardolino,
of course,
to direct my film. I would do a film adaptation of Different Strokes and cast Clint Eastwood in the Mr. Drummond role.
Oh, very good. Very good. Yep. Well done.
We haven't left
Can
Chris
we have
with much
Michael
to work
B. Jordan
with
as what was the older brother's name?
You need more choices here.
What was the older brother's name in Different Strokes?
I don't remember.
Willis.
Willis.
What are you talking about, Katie?
I haven't watched that since I was 7 years old.
Literally, it's the quote.
You're right. I should know it from the quote.
The only quote show. Chris, what would you take?
Well, I'm going to, morph off of yours a little bit. Now, look, I have to self-admit it because I'm not a big film expert here. I'll just take Spike Lee as my director because I don't know the other guys. So
it's a good, strong choice.
It's a strong. It's the only actual director, probably.
And I'm going to go film adaptation of a prequel of Different Strokes.
Oh, nice. I know where you're going.
With Robert Redford playing a young Mr. Drummond before he made it big.
Yes.
Before he moved into the penthouse.
Are we doing? We're doing Time Machine. We're taking like President's Men. Robert Redford.
That would be like 1960.
Natural.
I'm going Robert Redford. We don't really know how old Conrad Bain was.
No, nobody knows how old Conrad Bain was. And we could go then, and you got a lot of sequels built in. You could spin it right off into the Facts of Life universe off of that. I might create an 80s sitcom cinematic universe.
Yes.
Facts of Life. 227. I mean, we could get all of them. All right, that's Game of the Week. All right, time for 5 questions.
You want answers? You want answers? I want the truth! What makes a man, Mr. Lebowski?
What the fuck is the internet? Why?
All right, time for 5 questions. Chris will be answering this week. Chris is so multifaceted that we've hit all his different aspects of his life here in the future questions. All right, let's start with question 1. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Are you a read the morning paper type of person? Have you ever been? Are you still?
At my heart, I'm a thumbs up on the morning paper. There's nothing better than being down the shore in the summer and sitting out like on the balcony with a cup of coffee and the Philadelphia Inquirer. It's just part of Philadelphia summers. As much as I love it. If the paper's available, I'm reading it. But I don't have a newspaper in my hand every morning, not nearly as much as I wish I did. If the paper was delivered to my doorstep, I'd read it.
Somebody get this man a subscription.
Yeah, we got to get it.
Christmas present for Mr. Monero.
I think you get them for free now, basically, don't they? Aren't they just like handing them out?
No, you still buy that.
All right, question 2. Here we go. There's few people who love a late 80s, early 90s sitcom as much as me. The person who probably goes beyond my love, and in fact, we're the only people when people from those sitcoms die text each other immediately, making sure that we can mourn together. Chris, what do you think's a better late 1980s, early 1990s sitcom spin-off. These are spin-offs because that's all they did back then is spin-off. Even if it was like only one season of a sitcom, you would get a spin-off of it. Would you rather watch Empty Nest, of course, the spin-off of The Golden Girls, or would you rather watch Family Matters, the spin-off of Perfect Strangers?
I mean, there are more obvious spin-offs that you didn't choose. So I like this.
This is what Brian does.
This
Right,
is what I do. I go to the most obscure one I can think of.
Was Harriet Winslow like the elevator operator?
The
Yep.
elevator
Yes, she was.
operator for the Chicago Tribune.
Right. So I'm definitely
where
going
Cousin
with
Larry
Empty Nest.
worked.
Yes,
Cousin Laddie. Yes. I'm definitely going with Empty Nest. And probably only for the reason that there were many Dreyfus appearances on The Golden Girls when Dreyfus would come running in the door.
Yeah.
But there was an episode one time where those shows came together, and it's foggy to me a little bit, but I believe it was like a hurricane episode. And
I think it was. I think you're right.
And they were back-to-back episodes. It was like probably Saturday night, Golden Girls and Empty Nest back-to-back. And
Pretty
they
good Saturday
basically
night.
both. Yeah, I was little.
Lansdale.
that
Nothing
was a
much
pretty-
was happening in
There were
Lansdale.
only-
No
I think-
Nintendo.
1991.
I think there were only 5 networks at that point. I think.
But they actually both had an episode, I think, on the same night, centered around the same storyline of this hurricane hitting Miami.
I never watched
love that.
either of these
I
shows.
love that shit.
I had Prism.
Empty Nest
see, I
was
didn't have-
Leslie
I didn't have
Nielsen. Is that
cable.
who it was?
I didn't-
No,
Who was it?
Leslie Nielsen.
Who was it?
Come
Give me a
on, I
sec-
don't
I
know
wanna
his.
see who
I don't know
cares?
his.
I
He
need
looked
to
like
see it.
Leslie Nielsen.
No, I know who it
was
is. He looks like
It was
Leslie
the one
Nielsen.
with Joe Azuzu. You remember the
Joe
guy that was in all those?
Azuzu?
Oh, Jesus
He was all those
Christ.
car
Talking about?
commercials.
Who, by the way,
He's not
was
a real
on the
person.
Goldbergs last week. Did
What?
you
Really?
watch the Goldbergs
No.
last week?
No,
I didn't know it was still on.
Yes.
I thought it had ended.
He had a very prominent role in the
He
Goldbergs.
looks
last
like
week.
Leslie Nielsen.
He does. I'm not
That's
saying
not
it's-
him.
Richard
Oh, is it
Mulligan.
Richard Mulligan? Yes.
Yeah, Richard
He was
Mulligan.
also
Harry
RIP,
Weston.
R.I.P. He died as well. Raise a glass, Richard Mulligan.
Raise
He's
a
no
glass.
longer with us.
I really like the one daughter, the brunette.
sure
What
you
was
do.
her name?
Christy McNeil. She was like a big '70s star.
I think that was McNichol. Christy McNichol.
Christy
That was-
McNichol. Very
like-
good. That's
wow,
it.
I forgot
I think dated
this show.
Scott Baio. I think might have even been married to Scott Baio at
Wow.
one point.
Jim, between her and Blanche Devereaux, that's why I wasn't going out Saturday night.
Yeah, you got to hop in
I
life.
get you.
I personally
B. Arthur.
only at that time period I only picked my shows based on who was on Hollywood Squares that week. So as long as the people were in the squares, that was the show I would watch.
Do you ever
Here we
think, I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this point,
No.
but we're talking about 80s sitcoms. Like, isn't it scary now that like our parents are older than the Golden Girls were in like the Golden
Yes.
Girls episodes? Like they seem so old, but like they were probably in their late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, actually.
Well,
And
we
the
have
old-
improved the life expectancy, so
Yes,
percentage-wise, they're probably the same age.
Yeah.
Oh, Jim, always bringing real factual evidence.
Yeah.
That's what we love. All right, question 3. Chris, amazing baseball coach who is continuing to build a fantastic program and has one of the finest facilities on the East Coast for high school baseball at
Just
Plymouth
ask
Waste
the
High
fucking
School.
question.
No, talk more.
You could see Jim usually books the guest for the show. What is the best baseball game you've ever attended live?
I'm going to give you 2. One's ridiculously stupid, but then one's like really good. Well, I'll give you 3. Can I give you 3?
Give us
I
as many
give
as you
5
want.
answers
We're here all
whenever
night.
I'm on.
I was at a doubleheader between like the Phillies and I don't know who were the Marlins maybe years ago. I was a little kid. They were both terrible. They were like, the 2 last place teams, but it was like a doubleheader and both games went 11 or 12 innings. All sorts of obscure, like probably late 90s, early 2000s Phillies. That was probably like the Mark Parent. I think Mark Parent was catching. And I mean, they were bad, right? But they were these great games. So that was a horrible era of baseball and a meaningless game. This is number 2. I was at the Yankees-Red Sox game when Derek Jeter dove headfirst into the into the stands down the third base line. One of the most famous.
Really?
What?
Yep. I was at that game. I was in the right field.
Wow.
Out in right field.
That's impressive.
But probably the great, which just goes without saying that the greatest game that I've been to I was at Roy Halladay's no hitter in the NLDS.
Awesome.
So that was that was a pretty cool experience.
Awesome. All right. Question 4. Chris is a huge Springsteen fan. What's your favorite Springsteen album?
I'm nervous to answer this in front of Jim. Look, there's a lot of ways to go with this, right? And anybody who has a favorite musician who has a huge catalog of music knows that it's hard to answer. So the best way for me to answer this is, what is my favorite Springsteen album right now? Because it could change. Look, my favorite Springsteen song is No Surrender. And, that comes off of Born in the USA. Technically an album, it's not really an album, but sort of is, that really got me back into being a Springsteen fan was the 4-disc box set Tracks that came out in like the late 90s, because it just opened my eyes to all this Bruce Springsteen that I'd never heard of. But on this day, right now, my favorite Springsteen album is Letter to You, that just came out last Friday. And Jim, you and I have talked a little Springsteen over the years, and I know that you're much more of a fan of the old Springsteen. And,
what's funny? It would be considered old at this point, but if I was going to rank the albums as far as like, if I was going to put on an album and listen to every song, which one would I enjoy the most? It would probably be something like, it would either come down to Born to Run or Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
I put The Rising like right up there.
Yep.
And because I don't think I think there are certain songs on those other two albums that I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not into. I can listen to The Rising front to back. I haven't gotten too much into Letter to You. I've listened to a few songs. I just wish at this point he would like get a young producer, someone like that has some like something interesting going on, because this album specifically, like, it's starting to like glaze out, like it's just gonna glide over me like a warm blanket. There's nothing in it that like wakes me up yet.
So I think it's designed like, and God, I hope we get to see this, but there's songs in this album that will be incredible live. Yeah. And the way the whole album was recorded, in like 4 days and just all natural. But there's 2 songs, and I highly recommend them. Song for Orphans is one. If I Was a Priest was the other. They're both songs he wrote like 50 years ago. So they have the old Springsteen like lyrics and the real storytelling behind them, but they have the whole band playing in it in a more of like a modern way. And this Song for Orphans, I gotta tell you, I can't stop listening to it. Like, first it was Ghosts. Ghosts came out like a couple weeks ago, and it just draws me in. But now I'm listening to this Song for Orphans. Like, I'll listen to it again as soon as this is over. It's the lyrics are just awesome. They're so unique and so creative. So I'm really into it. I'm really into it right now. I'm excited that there's something new. That there's a guy that I teach with that he actually had a good analysis. And he said that, parts of this album are almost like Springsteen covering himself, because he is basically, recording with the band songs that were never really put on an album. And it's kind of cool to listen to like on YouTube to find this old version of him playing one of these songs, and then now finally hear the recorded version. So
yep.
I like it.
Love it. All right. And finally, deep thoughts question. Which president would you add to Mount Rushmore?
Barack Obama.
All right.
Trump.
There we go.
Barack Obama.
I'm not sure
there's no mountains in Florida.
Oh my God. Have you seen the picture of him standing in front of it?
I had they have to, where they could, if they did Trump, they have to do it in Red Rocks to match the color of the skin.
This is true.
No, and then they'd have to like white out around his eyes.
Some limestone in there.
That is 5 questions. Chris, we loved having you on. Now the Comm Majors rule always is we'll have you back, of course, but you get to pick the film next time.
Okay. I'd love to do that.
So
I did have a question I wanted to ask.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, what did you want to ask?
So I thought one of the most unique things about this movie was that while it's all about Nixon, there is no Nixon in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, there's people that portray everybody,
Yes.
but there's no Nixon. So, is there somebody that has not portrayed a president in a film that you would love to see play the role
Yes.
of president of the United States?
I have. Oh, actually, I don't know if he's played a president before.
All right. Well, say who it is.
No. I'm sorry. So in my head, you were asking who would play Nixon, which is different.
I just think the role of president. In
so
any
who would you like to see play a president in the movie, Katie?
So I was thinking of Martin Sheen, but obviously he's already been
a president.
He's been a president,
Well,
but to
on
me,
West
he's
Wing,
the
that
Nixon
wasn't a
president.
movie.
Yeah,
though.
but whatever. That's
Okay,
come
that's
on.
that's cheating.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I
have
call myself on it.
Mine is easy Idris.
Oh,
right away.
He's English. He'd have to be
Yeah,
a
well,
prime
he's got,
minister.
Stringer Bell had a really great
I'm
Baltimore
joking. You could
English
Stringer Bell.
accent.
I would love to have seen.
I actually just want him to be our president, like not play him in a movie.
Yes, unfortunately, law precludes that.
I'm sure he's a citizen.
That's such a good one. I mean, Kiefer Sutherland already played it on, Survivor, so we can't do that. I think that, who would be a really interesting actor playing a president, because I think you could be serious or you could be a comedy, is Robert Downey Jr.
Oh. All right,
Because
I'm coming back around.
Go in different
Going
ways.
outside the box on that one.
Same for me, because my first interpretation of your question was trying to think of like who would play Nixon. If I
Which
could just
would be
pick
interesting,
any
though.
actor or actress to play a U.S. president, it's going to be Meryl Streep, because she is the queen of my
that
heart.
would
That's
be
a
a great
great
choice.
choice.
Did she ever play one?
Nope.
I would always think Morgan Freeman, but he had played one.
Yeah, he was in Deep Impact.
Deep Impact, yeah.
He was good. All right, look.
That came out close to Armageddon.
The same time in
He didn't have a
co-production.
huge role in that movie, but I think that might be my favorite portrayal of a president.
He was really good. There's that speech.
Even though it's minor, even though it's very minor.
Oh, he gives a great speech in that movie. Well, we're releasing this on Election Day. If you, for some reason, have not voted early,
Oh my God, please go vote.
or you're not in the process of voting, please make sure that you vote, because people talk about un-American things. There's nothing more un-American than having a right to vote in a world where the majority of people do not have the right to vote and not voting. So please make sure you do that. And then after you vote, we'll have a special surprise episode for you next time. We're keeping it secret. We're keeping secret. Unfortunately, Pat Morgan will be here, so don't get too excited about it.
So
Everything
wait,
else
is our
about it
next
will be
episode like post-election?
Yeah.
post-election.
Oh my
Katie
God, I
might
just
not.
got a pit in my stomach.
Katie might not be here. She might be in Canada.
I
So-
have actually
Chris, is there
already
anything
started
you can
planning
say to
this.
make Katie feel better? I've tried. It's not going to work.
Katie, some polls came out today that are staggering.
You know what I say about polls.
Yeah, but when a poll has Joe Biden up by like 17 points in Wisconsin,
I
mean,
freaking
that's a lot.
What I will
A lot of
say
points.
to you is this: it doesn't matter what the polls say. Just make sure that you have 17 cases of One Hope wine in the cellar,
That's
and no
exactly
matter
right.
what happens, you'll
I
be
have
okay.
started planning out the bunker in the basement, and I've started buying gallons of
I'm
water.
very far north. I
know.
right
We
near
should
the
just
border.
all just move to Canada. Well, we're not allowed to go
The
there.
problem is
But
we have no guns. We have no
Well, you
weapons,
can't really,
so
you can't travel
that's-
anywhere
the
anymore.
one time you'd want to leave the
what's
country.
this all about? I have a
Nobody
beard.
wants you in.
What's this all
Nobody will
about?
take
I have a
us.
beard and I love
This
pancakes.
is the ultimate irony of this
I am
situation.
Canadian.
I am
He
already
has
watching
created a
Schitt's Creek
situation where
every
we
night.
can't leave. If
Yeah.
we don't like him, we can't actually leave.
Nah. Yeah.
This is like actual hell.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
We'll see you next
Bye.
time.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Wonderful.
Are we off the air?